in this district. Oh gosh. But there's a lot of reasons that I'm running. I'm running because I have decided to stop teaching in this district, and the exact same reasons why I've stopped teaching are the reasons why I'm running.
Thank you. Next, we have Travis Tozer.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to join this forum tonight. Very much appreciate the opportunity. I'm running because I'm very passionate about public education. My father was a teacher. My partner, who teaches at Santa Fe Trail Middle School, is also a teacher. I've preached the virtues of public education long before I declared my candidacy. I've been in countless discussions where I was the one defending public education, and I have many reasons for doing so that I don't need to get into right now. But I understand what's being asked of me when I'm volunteering to join the school board. I'm ready to do this work. I'm very prepared to do this work. My priorities, if I am elected, are going to be open-mindedness, fairness, equity, communication, cooperation, well-informed decision-making. I want to see this district not just succeed, but to excel. That's all I have for that.
Next, we have Kay Emerson.
Hello, I'm Katie Emerson, and excited to be here tonight. Super excited to be here tonight. So the question is, why did I decide to run? So for me, I've been around here in Lawrence for about 20 years, and I have been a longtime community volunteer and education advocate, and I have a degree in psychology from the University of Kansas, go Jayhawks, and I'm also a parent here within our school district. And so for me, it comes down to three things. I really feel like Lawrence needs to focus their efforts on opportunity, access, and choice. There's lots of reasons, why I'm running for school board, because, I think about my experience. I have experience with building bridges needed to secure resources with my grant management and my experience in business negotiation. I really like to kind of lean in to the hard conversations and those uncomfortable conversations. So it's more than just asking questions. It's being able to get to the answers in order to make the best decisions for our kids and our families and really ourselves. And so I really think about, really why is it that I'm running? And I've been on the sideline for quite some time, going to meetings with the COVID-19 committee, going to meetings as the chairperson of the Parents of Color Equity Advisory Team. Like there's just so much that I've done, and I feel like it's time to show up and say that I'm enough, because we all are enough. And it's really about being able to stand up and believe in yourself. And so I'm here to say, you don't have to be a leader. You could be an ordinary person, but you could do it, and we can all do it together. So thank you.
Next, we have Nate Morches.
Hi, my name is Nate Morches. I am the president and co-founder of RPG on Mass Street. I sit on two boards here in the community, Trinity In Home Care, as well as the Lawrence Restaurant Association. I have 4 children in the school system, 2 of which were adopted through foster care, and 1 of which has special needs. And it really has been that experience with the special needs program which made me realize just how many resources are available and how amazing the program has been for us as a family. And what a resource it is to not just my family, but the entire community. The important things, the priorities that I will focus on, if elected, are going to be threefold. The first is post-secondary education. Students need to understand that traditional college is not the only option. It's not job or college. It's there's all kinds of resources out there, all kinds of paths forward. Community college, apprenticeships, entrepreneurship, trade school, all of these things are not just they're not lesser options. Depending on the skills and the goals of the student, they may be the better option. Second piece is the mental well-being of teachers and students. We've had quite a year, and as a registered nurse, working front lines in the ER and the ICU, I have seen the number of mental health patients triple since February. And pediatric patients are just on the same lines. And so it's extremely important that we support that moving forward. Finally, and my time is running out here, but financial sustainability for the district. This is just going to be key as we work to develop key programs moving forward.
Thank you. Next, we have G.R. Gordon Ross.
Good evening. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Excited to see everybody again. I'm running for re-election to the school board, one, because I'm passionate about public education, and I'm passionate to continue the work that we've already accomplished over the last 4 years. We've hired a superintendent that continues to push us forward as a district. We've been able to create and implement a 5-year strategic plan that will help us address many of our district's immediate problems and long-term ones. And with the adoption of the interest-based bargaining process for both the LEA and PAL CWA, we've laid groundwork for strong labor negotiations now and into the future. If reelected, I would continue to work in these areas and also prioritize continued work on closing the achievement gap, re-examining our elementary boundaries to look for ways to increase the equity of class size across the district, and working on the facilities committee to make sure our district facilities are up to date across the board and can handle whatever Kansas can throw at them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Clissold.
There we go. I'm Melissa Clissold, and I'm a previous paraeducator in our Lawrence Public School districts. I'm currently the cheer coach for Liberty Memorial Central and Billy Mills Middle Schools, and I own MC Sports Awards. So my journeys all started with cheer shoes. I coached, like I coach, and I wanted to do a fundraiser to help families buy cheer shoes. Board policy prevented me from doing that. However, the high school teams are allowed to have fundraisers. I don't understand why my teams are considered less than, but they are, and that's not equity. But then the farther I go into this journey, I find more reasons we need new leadership on the board, filling all 3 seats with 3 new people. Our district receives 54% of this community's tax dollars, and yet we have staff members that depend on second jobs and public assistance to survive. And our district leaders should be ashamed. Kelly and GR both say that they support increasing pay for classified staff. And Kelly's a lead on the district's negotiation team that's currently going on with PAL CWA. And they offered a 0.24% raise, 0.24%, right? If you have a salary of $220,000, that's fine. But for $11 an hour, that's just enough to kick you off your food assistance.
Thank you. I will repeat the question again. Why are you running for the school board, and what are your priorities if elected? Douglas Redding.
Hi. I'm running for school board principally out of a belief that there's underrepresentation in Central and East Lawrence. I'd like to affect change. I'd like to make sure that we're looking to the future. I think everyone did a commendable job during this past year, but I think there were opportunities that have been missed. And I would like to address climate change within the curriculum. And I would like to address the well-being of students and staff. And that means, yes, equity, and that's all I got right now. Sorry, I'm clutching up.
Thank you. Next, we have Kelly Jones.
Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty. My name is Kelly Jones, and I am currently the board president and will be for about 3 more days until Erica Hill takes over. I'm in about my 25th year of social services. I've worked in schools, I've worked in correctional facilities and hospices and hospitals. I've been in hundreds of Douglas County homes providing services and meeting with the people that we need. And most of the work that I've done has been crisis work. And what I found when I did that work is that when someone had more educational attainment or had greater opportunity to quality education, we saw better outcomes for them in terms of quality of life and how they could weather the climate change or the crisis that they were in. So for me, being on the board is the next natural step to my professional career, and being able to utilize the expertise I've gained in a different way to work toward a solution to some of the things that I've seen. I truly believe that education is the thing that will serve the people that I've served. And I'm excited to do what's best for the Lorenzians that are under 18 or 18 and under, and for those that are transitioning into adulthood as we as a community support them. So I'm proud of the work that I've done on the board, and I'll talk about it a little bit tonight. I would really like the opportunity to continue to utilize the skills I've developed both in negotiations. I'm on the policy committee. I've served 2 years on the executive committee. I've been on the budget committee. I have a deep knowledge of how the board works. I help write the board manual. And it's true that I'm rooted in the work that we've done, but it's really been about supporting Dr. Lewis and where he's going and his vision, and making sure that the strategic plan that he's outlined, which was built on the input of community members from across our district and our schools and our town, can be truly realized. So that's what I'm coming to do, is to help to make sure that that strategic plan happens.
Thank you. Next we have Elizabeth Stevens.
Hello, good evening. So my name is Elizabeth Stevens. Thank you so much for having us and for hosting this forum. I think that, I guess starting out, so I am a Lawrence native. I am from here, grew up in North Lawrence, and went through both private school and public schools as a student, where I encountered some adverse experiences that made focusing on education difficult. Those experiences really had a lasting impact on me as an individual. And I know that there are loads of other folks just like me who've had that experience. And I think that, my goal in running for school board is to help provide a voice for people whose voices are typically not heard, as well as looking at really diversifying our our governing structures, right? So in order to say that we're implementing diverse structures, we need to have a wide range of folks from race, socioeconomic status, education status, et cetera. And I hope to do that and to bring some of my experience to this body. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Miranda Zarlengo.
Hello, thank you for having this event tonight. To tell you a little bit about myself, I spent the first half of my career in early childhood education as the director of Child Care Center. I went into that field purely out of passion towards helping kids that needed it a little extra. And that's where my passion comes from. Through that process, I have changed careers, and now I work in, I do change management for a global company, and spend a lot of time working with adults and spending time trying to make processes improved through communication and leadership. But today I'm here because I have a 7-year-old that is now going into 2nd grade, and spent the last year speaking at board meetings and speaking out, asking questions and pushing for real answers for some of the issues I was having with the educational process. Yes, I understand there was a lot of challenges last year, but there weren't many answers to questions that I had that didn't really come to play because of the pandemic, such as challenges around neurodiversity and needing some guidance and some real support. I'm here today to help support those children that need an advocate to push and ask the questions that no one else is asking.
Thank you. Next, we will have question number 2. How would you address current and historic inequities in the Lawrence Public School System? Travis Tozer.
Well, I would start on this one. Well, I can be brief. This question's a terrific example of how I don't intend to bullshit my way through this job. I'm a white man from West Lawrence, and I know that I have a lot more listening to do before I start talking about this question. So I will cede the rest of my time to the remainder of the speakers and start taking notes.
Thank you. Next, we have Kay Emerson.
Again. So for me, this gets to my priority of access. I'm a huge believer that knowledge is power. I've been on that kick ever since my 3rd grade teacher at Lowman Hill Elementary in Topeka, Kansas, used to play a song for us every day. If you go to my website, you could listen to the song. I'm just a huge advocate of that. But knowledge is power. And this kind of gets to how Lawrence is a community filled with educated individuals that in their silos are doing amazing work across the town, just in their own to advance their own initiatives, which is great. But in order to address our historic inequities, we must improve our practices in sharing the information freely and readily, and be proactive in finding ways to connect our resources to address the needs that exist in our classrooms. I think about how it's more important to not just bring in diverse people to have conversation. We have to also build upon unity. And so my goal as a school board member is to create those access points for the community to find solutions by accessing what already exists in our great city through building out our partnerships that we have not yet explored. And I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nate Morches.
Thank you. The question itself begins with addressing current and historic inequities. I think one of the most important things here is to accurately teach history. It's so important to make sure that when we're teaching the different events in history that have been steeped in racism, that we don't ignore or sugarcoat necessarily what exactly we're teaching. What happened, and we have to tell the truth about these things so that we as a society do not make those same mistakes again. And it's so important for the upcoming leaders in the next generation. In terms of current inequities, it's going to be extremely important that we continue the research that has already been done about who experiences disadvantages. So we have done a lot of research in terms of the various minority groups and achievement gaps. And, as I said earlier, I'm a parent of 2 foster children who I've adopted. And while they look just fine on the outside, at home we get to see how difficult they really have it, having experienced trauma early on in life. And those types of things can set them back. And so I think the research is going to be an important point, making sure we understand all the different people who have different, very special disadvantages. I think that the strategic plan, which has been put in place, we've just barely begun to make progress, but sticking to that is going to be very important because it does address a lot of those achievement gaps. Restorative justice, which we'll touch on a little bit later, is another program which is very important as we seek equity in our district. And also I'll finish by as a biracial Filipino American, I look forward to being something of an example to those who don't fit in either of their cultural heritage groups.
Thank you. Next, we have G.R. Gordon Ross.
Thank you. The strategic plan that we develop has laid a great foundation for us to use in addressing the inequities within the school system. Item 1.2 states use instructional resources that honor and preserve students' diverse cultural backgrounds. Within that strategic goal are sub-goals such as evaluating resources for alignment to standards, scope and sequence, and cultural relevance. Surveying and gathering staff input and feedback about the curriculum and making sure we define aspects of the curriculum that are non-negotiable a part of that goal. Also, item 5.2 states develop systems that support student-focused data-based decision-making. Within that goal are sub-goals such as determining measurement tools, an assessment schedule, standard reports, developing a schedule for checking fidelity and collecting staff feedback on the whole process. Outside of the strategic plan, I would continue to focus on these inequities as well as class size with my work on the boundary committee, low numbers of students of color enrolling in AP, Jayhawk, Blueprint classes, and the continued gap in our graduation rates by ethnicity or race. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Clissold.
So to begin really addressing these issues, I think it really boils down to where we're focusing our resources. So for example, starting with our proper distribution of our money. So Title I money right now that comes into our district is only given to the elementary schools. And we have 2 middle schools that could desperately use Title I money, and they qualify for Title I money. But the thought process is we intercept the underprivileged students early, but that's not really working, because what about the kids who didn't go to elementary in our school? Why are they less than? Why aren't they important? That money needs to go to our middle schools as well. In order for us to achieve the equity that our school talks about, our district talks about it all the time, but we're not achieving it if we're not really distributing the funding properly. I mean, these middle schools could use their Title I funding to hire additional teachers to reduce classroom sizes. And we all know that classroom sizes produce successful outcomes and more improved outcomes, especially for our minority students. It's critical. So I just think we need to really refocus, our funding. So, I mean, also we talk about making data-based decisions, and I don't want to make data-based decisions. Those are numbers on papers, and you can skew data to say whatever you want. We need to be making data-informed decisions, which includes conversations with our educators and students who are in our hallways daily at a time. So making data-based decisions, that is not what we need to do in a school district. We need to be data-informed.
Thank you. Next, we have Douglas Redding.
Hi. As far as historic inequities in the Lawrence public school system, they're probably pretty close to the same as the current, but not quite as debilitating. I would say that it's rooted in real estate. I would say that each new school goes through a period of time of being located on the Nouveau Riche part of town, like West Middle School and now Southwest Middle School. So that would be the economic inequities, I would say. They get the newer tech, they get the newer facilities, but all that, changes after time. And I do think that Lawrence schools are on the right track. I think they've been doing a lot better with the AVID program, and with the College and Career Center. I think we're doing really, really well in that area. But as far as geographic location, I think it's going to be more than geographic location and real estate. It's going to be talking to parents, and you're going to have to involve parents if you're going to talk about their kids. And that's going to be a little tricky. Parents are sensitive, and parents are screw ups. I'm speaking as a parent myself, and I'm speaking as a highly judgmental school bus driver and high school dropout. Nowadays, I wish I could go to school for the rest of my life. That's all I would really want to do. But how would I address these things? I think we need to have tiny classes or highly atomized classes, 6 to 7 students per teacher. And but that means more money. That means a lot more money. And how are you going to get that money? And what are you going to promise the paras? It's going to take more than we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. How would you address current and historic inequities in the Lawrence Public School System? Kelly Jones.
So this is an issue that's been core to my practice on the board. And one of the key things I think we can do as board members is get out of the way of the experts in the district who do this work. So we're quite lucky to have Dr. Lewis leading the district, but also now to have Dr. Johnson, who's the Executive Director of Inclusion, Engagement, and Belonging, helping us organize the work that we're doing. A few years ago, myself, Shannon Kimball, and Melissa Johnson took on the board work of developing and drafting the equity policy for the district. I'm proud of that policy. I believe in it. And I believe that if we remain, if the board practices it with fidelity, we'll see the kinds of outcomes we want to see for students. And core to that practice, I think if you look up the policy online, what you'll see is that we're looking for clear accountability measures and metrics from the district administrators. And Dr. Lewis is more than willing to work with the board on that. And those metrics need to be varied and not just standardized testing. We need to look for resources and allocate our resources appropriately to students for whom they would most benefit. And that's something I saw Lawrence struggle a bit with during the pandemic in terms of really coming to peace with that. So you need board members that are willing to look at those people for whom the system has always worked and say, hey, we're going to do more over here, and really face down the critiques and the criticism that you might get in that endeavor. I also have found that we need to work to sustain our faculty of color. So looking at how are we creating an environment which is welcoming and encouraging for them to stay, and how do we elevate them to positions where they can really shine and be present for our students, and our students can see culturally relevant material for them in the classroom. So this is an area where I can see that there are many places the board can help with, and it is our absolute moral imperative to be doing that work.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Stevens.
Thank you so much. So I think, so really in order to address current inequities, I think we have to have a good hard look at historical inequities, which requires some understanding and some acknowledgement of where we started. In that, which, doing that work requires sitting in some discomfort. We have to be willing to sit with that discomfort and do some long, hard assessments. Then we can take a closer look at how we approach the current inequities that our students are facing. Moving forward and looking at things like how do we recruit and retain teachers of color, support staff of color, are incredibly important, right? How do we keep kids do wonderfully when they see people who look like themselves, who are in positions of authority. And if we're able to, not only recruit new teachers and support staff, but also train the existing staff that we have and support and facilitate an environment in which people can do some of that exploration and sit in some of that discomfort, I think then we can start to address the current inequities. That also looks at things like making sure that we are compensating our teachers and providing that supportive environment. It's really hard to do all of these things when you're not able to meet your core needs yourself.
Thank you. Next, we have Miranda Zerlingo.
So the historical and current inequities that are occurring and have occurred within the district, I have only the lens that I can come with this information. I have a soon-to-be second grader, and this is my experience. And what I would like to see as a sole providing single mother, and how I'm experiencing the school, is that there's many gaps for me and for my child, I feel. And that is our lens and that is our experience. But I definitely have a concern for other families in the district and other inequities that I don't know because I see it at my level. And so I would really, moving forward, ask the questions and then get some real action in place. This is my concern, is just what is the action plan? And if there's not one, we need to quickly create one. And that's my lens, and that's all I can bring to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrew Nussbaum.
I'm just going to repeat that question again because it's so important, right? How would you address current and historic inequities? I think it's even more appropriate to say like injustice, right? In the Lawrence public school system, I would say exactly. We need to name that over and over again. We got to face that over and over again. We need to acknowledge and name and celebrate and affirm that Black lives must matter at school and in our community. We've got to acknowledge it, that our school system has been historically and is currently complicit and perpetuates harm onto students and families, right? Let's be real. We got to unpack that and face it. We got to stop saying, even tonight, achievement gap. That's a victim blaming term, right? We got to stop saying achievement gaps when it's really structural racism, right? When it's really sexism, when it's really classism, when it's really ableism. We got to stop saying achievement gaps and shift that to at least opportunity gaps, right? Let alone barriers structurally, intimately, and institutionally. At least we can be more honest together. Our strategic plan is not enough unless and until we actually center multiply marginalized young peoples and students and their wisdom on the margins and our classified staff's wisdom alongside them, unless we center the experiences and center our public education experience on queer people, non-white, poor, working class, special education students, and more non-dominant identities and their experiences in this district, all of our talk, all of our, in quotes, all students one team isn't meaningful. Because the students I've been working with, that's not the team that they've been allowed to be on, right? We must reimagine safety by working towards police-free schools, living wages for all staff, redistribution of resources from district leadership and administration to certified teachers and especially classified staff. I can say this, I'm gonna say this, I've been along people that have been saying this because my life purpose in educational spaces has been to amplify the dignity of young adults, their experiences, and working towards visions of wholeness while working together in community to advocate for more just and inclusive learning environments.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to question number 3. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the Lawrence Public Schools, and how would you address those challenges? We'll start with Kay Emerson.
All right. So I just want to acknowledge Andrew. I love it when you are in a space, your voice just kind of resonates in your thought patterns there. So I want to say thank you for that. So one of the biggest challenges facing the Lawrence Public School District is, as my time as an education work group facilitator for United Way of Douglas County back in 2015, and then currently just sitting on the district site council. One of the things that we talk about a lot is like appropriation of funds and appropriation of resources, and where can we move dollars around when there's not dollars, or so there's just a lot of uncertainty when it comes to our resources, and we have a huge customer service issue with our students leaving the districts, which last night they were talking about $16,000 per pupil. One family of 5 people, that's, well, someone with math can do that. And so for me, I feel like our biggest challenge as a school district is leveraging, our resources, leveraging our skills and our resources and the information that we actually have within our city, because we spend a lot of time looking outside of where we can get funding rather than looking inside. And so for me, it's not enough that we discuss the cause root of our budget deficit. I just go back to the fact of opportunities and being able to seek out those partnerships to help ourselves be able to address those school issues. So yeah, that's what I'll say. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Nate Morches.
Yes, thank you. I have three things I'd like to mention here. The last two are pretty closely related, but the first is the mental health, the mental well-being of our teachers and students. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen just tragic things happening in the hospital as a registered nurse, and it's going to be so important that we continue to bolster our relationship with Bert Nash. I'll be meeting with them next week to discuss possible options, ways to expand the RAP program, different opportunities for the future. So I agree with Kay when she talks about just building up those partnerships in the community. The other two things that I'd mentioned that are closely related are increasing staff wages as well as financial stability. As a business owner who's made it through the pandemic, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we changed from a normal restaurant pay program to livable wages for everybody. We pay $15 an hour or more to all of our employees, and we did it in a way that is financially sustainable. We moved some things around, and we created a new way that we charge customers. So now suddenly we're able to do this, pay this wage. And you know, as I hear about the budget, and I have heard in the school board meetings about the budget, I firmly believe that they're working as hard as possible. I'd like to offer my creativity as an entrepreneur to come up with new ideas as well. Perhaps there's new things that we can do, new structures, new ways to deal with a budget in order to pay our staff a living wage and continue to meet the goals for our financial stability.
Thank you. Next, we have G.R. Gordon Ross.
Thank you. So I've three things that I think are the biggest issues that we need to address. One is the current budget situation. You know, we've heard a lot about opinions on the budget. We'll continue to hear a lot of opinions on the budget and how we manage our resources, and who thinks we should do what and who thinks other people should do what, and regardless of where it goes, the district has a budget problem, and the district needs to solve that budget problem however they choose to spend their money. And I think that's probably the single biggest issue that we have to solve, and it's probably going to take us multiple years to solve it. The next issue is to continue the equity work that we have. You know, Dr. Stubblefield led that work, and she did a phenomenal job in leading that work. And Dr. Johnson has some pretty big shoes to fill. I think she's capable of filling those shoes, and can help us to continue to move forward, to advance the work that's been done, to continue the progress, and to keep us moving forward. And I think the last thing that we need to work on is, over this last year, there was a lot of relationships that were broken. If you take, you know, if you look at board, administration, students, staff, families, the community, if you take all those groups at some time during the year, any one or multiple of those groups that at some point had trust broken, got angry, got upset, and relationships were just broken. And I think there's a lot of work to be done among all those groups to rebuild some of those relationships, to rebuild some of that trust. And I think that is as much of a key issue as anything else that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Clissold.
I was reading the question again. So the school district has, you know, obviously more than one or two challenges, but I do say that the budget is a huge challenge. And that's because I don't, you know, and as GR spoke, yes, we are going to criticize how the money has been spent, because we are 1.2 million, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in debt. That could be wrong, but I think that the number I saw was 1.2 million, which a few years ago we had a surplus, and that is the responsibility of our current sitting board. So I think we need to focus on that. But budget wise, in order to increase our budget, we need to increase our student base, which means offering things that other neighboring districts don't. We have to hire more teachers, to reduce our classroom sizes, to have more successful outcomes, you know, with our students. We don't need to be closing buildings. We need to find a way to reduce class sizes. I think that's just as important. Educators in this district, we can go to any neighboring district and make a significant amount more. And no educator gets into education to get rich. We do it because of love. So I hear people say, well, they should leave and go somewhere else. If educators left their jobs to get paid more, you wouldn't have any educators in this district. We've been very disrespectful to that. And that's, you know, we have to figure out a way to make sure we're increasing pay for all staff. You know, our current board, actually, Kelly told me last night, she does support a $15 an hour income for our classified staff. But in the 2 years I've been here, I haven't seen that district do anything in improving that and reducing that gap. We still have $11 an hour. And I promise you, a 0.24% raise, that absolutely doesn't even get us close to $15 an hour. And I think that just really explains how our current setting board views their staff and values them.
Thank you. Next, we have Douglas Redding.
Hi. Thank you, Melissa. And biggest challenges, they're manifold. But I don't even think $15 an hour is going to be enough. We've got to give people something to believe in. And we can't go back to what we used to think of as normal. We have to go beyond. We have to go beyond just thinking of ourselves as being the best in the state or even in the Midwest. We have to try and be something exemplary for the hemisphere. And part of that is recognizing and owning up to our kids and the students about climate change. And we have a remarkable opportunity here in Kansas. We have the University of Kansas, we have K-State, Manhattan, you know, their Ballywick is farming. If we could provide kids with something to hope for rather than just treading water, you know, money is not going to do it, but it's going to take a lot of money to make real progress. The biggest challenge is, how are we going to tell our kids that there's going to be air to breathe in 50 years? So let's work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. I will repeat the question. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the Lawrence Public Schools, and how would you address those challenges? Kelly Jones.
So having sat on the board for the last 3.5 years, I have a realistic view about what it is that board members can accomplish in the time that we're given on the board, particularly when there's been a pandemic. So for me, the priorities, without question, as we talked about in our last question, are absolutely 100% our equity work. That's the board's first priority. And when you do right in our equity work, you do right for all students. The pandemic recovery is also incredibly important, and I agree with much of what has been said. I just want to focus on our teacher-led educational initiatives like the Kansas Ken School redesign and substantive social emotional programming that we're seeing and approach changes that we're seeing, that I think coming and teaching in Lawrence make it a more exciting place to be, and that create an environment where you can do the work for kids that fills your souls. A board needs to be prepared to support that work. Today, our educators are well positioned to leverage their evidence-based learning and strategies through the Federal CARES Act. The board and the district have a responsibility to utilize that within the equity work that we're doing in the pandemic recovery. I am myself a mental health professional, and certainly I understand there is social emotional work that we need to do. I can hear a teenager knocking at my door, so excuse me for that. I do want to point out, and one of the things that I think is important for board members to do is to celebrate when there are success. So we do have pandemic recovery to do, but our teachers did good work this year, solid good work. And in fact, what we see in our Ames Web data is that in January, when we had higher percentage of students in high risk categories, by the end of the year, they were ending in a normal, where we normally see students at in that time of the year. And imagine what they can do if Topeka fully funded our education program. So I can understand why there would be frustration about what we've done with our financial health. That's absolutely a priority for the board. Our contingency funds have dropped well below what is a responsible place for the board to be at. And certainly we need to work with our budget committee to make sure we are backing into a wage that is something, and compensation that is something that our staff can live with and feel proud to be at our district.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Stevens.
Hello, thank you. So I think that there are some of the main issues that I see is that, and especially that were highlighted through COVID, was really the engagement of our families and students who live in the margins. How do we work to engage with those families in a meaningful way? So families who may feel unempowered and frankly afraid to reach out to their educators, afraid to reach out to their school board to ask for resources. How do we do a better job at communicating with those families and engaging them in their education? Also, how do we look at, providing better resources and advocating for our children who are in foster care, group home placements, incarcerated youth? How do we look at what kind of interventions are we putting in place? What kind of supports are there for those kids? Those kids deserve to be prioritized and oftentimes get pushed aside or get labeled instead of given the resources that they deserve. In order to do those things, we have to look at who has contact with those children. And many times those are going to be our paraeducators. Our paraeducators have contact with some of our most vulnerable youth, and they have an opportunity to really do some powerful work with those kids and connections. Those connections and that work deserves to be valued and compensated appropriately. I look forward to continuing these conversations with all of you.
Thank you. Next, we have Miranda Zarlingo.
So I feel the biggest challenge with the school currently is the morale that's post-COVID experience between the students and school, parents and the school. And I feel that it's going to take a lot of work to create balance there again. And I'm really hoping in the next 6 weeks that this has been addressed and there's a plan to help with communication. There's a real lack of communication across the board with everyone, and the level of frustration for teachers and for parents and for students, and the lack of awareness of the day-to-day experience was challenging, and that really broke down trust. And I feel that is something that we really need to work on. And I'm hoping that we're not just going to not address the issues that have occurred and the feelings, and really work to get our students feeling more confident at school. And yes, that hits mental health issues, but I'm hoping there's support for the teachers to have the skills to identify some of these issues around mental health. And that's as a parent and from the students and community members that I've spoken with, there's a lot of negativity to hopefully start turning around.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrew Nussbaum.
I appreciate what everybody is saying and acknowledging that I have been a public education teacher. We know we've done good work, but we also know we haven't been valued, right? I also wish the biggest challenges we had in public education in Lawrence Public Schools was trust and morale and communication issues. I think we'd be doing great if those were the biggest challenges we had. The reality is we are in public education nested in community, right? Nested in the state, nested in the federal system. So we have so many challenges compounding on the systems that we exist in. So I'm gonna go back to some of the experiences I've had in the district as early on a leader of the equity journey, an equity team leader at Free State, and then about 5 years into it, decided to stop being an official leader in that PEG equity teamwork because it wasn't equitable enough, it wasn't radical enough, it wasn't getting to the structural roots enough. The equity journey the district has been on over the past 13 years has not been enough. When we actually look at the data comparable to our own past, our neighboring school districts currently statewide and locally, our equity outcomes are not any better. That's not good enough. We also must look at the systems our schools and staff and students are nested in, the decision-making processes that for too long have been too top-down that govern our actions, and how, why, and where power is held and by whom. Equity has to be an active goal and process. It also must be structural and interpersonal relational. Too many times our equity journey, in quotes, has been focused on the hearts and minds of individual teachers and staff. While important, of course, this has effectively distracted our energy, time, resources, and strategic plans away from finding system-wide actions to interact with systemic challenges, including structural racism, poverty, lack of a living wage for classified staff. And let's talk about the transphobic and anti-public education legislation that's happening in our state house currently.
Thank you. Next, we have Travis Tozer. You're on mute.
Yep, it was on me. I just started talking. I should have known better. Anyhow, I was saying that I agree with just about everything I've heard here today. I think the biggest problem, though, still happens to be the budget. I think with the head count dropping and the $4.3 million shortfall I remember hearing about at the last meeting, that pretty much is the big red flag in the sand. So I intend to continue the board's process or his path of collaborative creativity when it comes to the budget, utilizing bond issues for facilities improvements, lobbying local businesses for partnerships. You may definitely lobbying Topeka for a raise of the BSAPP. There may even be ways to help bring in new students and families into the district. It sounds like there is a bit of a exodus, but I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to live in Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have G.R. Gordon Ross.
I already answered the question. I'm happy to answer it again if you'd like me to, but
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
answered this question already. You're fine, no worries.
We're moving on to question number 4. Give us your understanding of restorative practices. Nate Morches.
As I understand a little bit about the local history about restorative practices, I know that Justice Matters, the group here in town, was a big proponent of this in terms of working towards bringing it into the school systems. From their perspective, it comes from a passage in scripture, Micah 6:8, which is do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. But the importance of this of restorative practices is the fact that there have been so many problems with how we've used punitive measures in the past. There are disproportionately more boys who have gotten suspended than girls, disproportionate number of minorities who have gotten suspended in comparison to their white counterparts. And the program itself is about actually bringing people together, discussing the problem, working it out so that relationships are restored.
Thank you. Next, we have G.R. Gordon Ross.
So my understanding, restorative practices, specifically in a school setting, is taking and reframing the conversation around discipline to be the result of discipline to be less punitive and be more of a conversation between those who are affected by the negative action and those who caused it, so that the consequences of that action can be something that gives back to those that were affected and to the community as a whole, so that they can feel more a part of the community, feel the impact of their actions, and rebuild community and rebuild their sense of it, and thus helping to end some of the negative stigma around those punitive effects that in a lot of cases pull kids out of classrooms, pulls them away from the community that we desperately need them to continue to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Clissold.
Restorative practices really it's about changing mindsets. So it shifts the conversation to be less punishment oriented, and then it offers opportunity for everyone affected by whatever the action was to talk about how to make things right. So, I mean, the truth is you can't punish a child into doing anything, but you can show them compassion and teach them how to make better choices in the future. That's what restorative practices are.
Thank you. Next, we have Douglas Redding.
Can you all hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, great. As I understand restorative practices, it's to be made whole. And I think the best thing we can do is, I'm going to just defer to Melissa's statement. We need compassion. We need to show kids how to help each other. And that's not going to be done with more punishment. And that's all I have to say on that right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I will repeat the question. Give us your understanding of restorative practices. Elizabeth Stevens.
Thank you. So my understanding is that restorative practices do more of the asking the question, why? Why did the behavior occur? Why was there an outburst? How can we intervene? So providing the opportunity for an alternative intervention and looking at things like suspension and expulsion as an absolute last resort. These practices have been, hi, Travis's son. But these practices seem to be trauma informed and could really benefit a lot of our kids whose behaviors may be disruptive to the classroom. Actually, what could benefit that kid? Someone taking the time and asking why, what's going on, how can we help? It's my understanding.
Thank you. Next, we have Miranda Zerlengo.
So my knowledge of restorative practice is bringing a mindful experience to the classroom and school. Again, trying to build trust and giving these students a voice, and not only students, but parents, and opening up a dialogue to have them engage rather than push away, and changing the atmosphere of the classroom to openness and compassion.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrew Nussbaum.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Knowing we're running for school board here of a school system and trying to undo a lot of the historical and current inequities and injustices, I do feel it's important for all of us running on the school board to have a deeper understanding, a deeper knowledge of restorative practices, especially if we're going to present that as something that we believe in. I'm saying that as a restorative justice practitioner, I have a master's in conflict transformation and restorative justice from the Center for Justice and Peace Building in Virginia. Restorative justice practitioner, both with a lot of middle school students, community organizing, and with incarcerated persons in prison systems. Restorative practices is actually even already like a vanillifying of restorative justice practices, right? School systems have already taken out the justice word as it. It's about persons involved, both directly and collectively, who has been harmed, asking these questions like Elizabeth said, who has been harmed, what was the harm, by whom, and why, and how can we work through processes like circles and other processes to make right relationships again, to make the relationships right instead of punitive, more collective.
Thank you. Next, we have Travis Tozer.
First, I'm deeply sorry, Elizabeth, for distracting you in the middle of your response. That was not in any way intentional. My understanding of restorative justice is that it is a school of thought built around injecting empathy through curriculum implementations. As soon as I read this question to my partner, she handed me this book. It's a book by John Dewey. Many of you may already be familiar, but Dewey's thesis is that the experience drives education. Using appropriate instructional practices, empathy can be fostered in our classrooms. We're building little citizens. Empathy is essential to an inclusive and anti-racist society. A restorative curriculum is a safe place to practice empathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kay Emerson.
So as a commissioner to the Human Relations Commission for the city and the chair of our district equity parents of color advisory team, I first and foremost, restorative practice is a gift. And I want to acknowledge acknowledge and give gratitude for its origins, first and foremost. The practice itself of justice, or the practice relies on an assumption that everyone in a community is relationally connected to their community. Therefore, when we have a wrong has occurred, it's about being able to heal that wound in the community. So we're not just teaching practices, we're teaching community. So I think about this to say that what we're doing here in USD 497, we're taking a step to mitigate the harm that's happening to our students and helping them build a community that will help them as they move on after they graduate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question. This is question number 5, which will be the last question.
Ursula, can I answer? Can I answer?
Oh,
the restorative practice one. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to.
Yes.
So it's hard not to follow up on what Kay was saying because it got me pretty excited. So I had to interrupt. So like Andrew, I also have training in restorative practices and have worked in correctional facilities and worked with victim advocates and a few other groups. Restorative practices roots are actually in Indigenous culture, just as a point of clarity. But what I like about this conversation and what I think is so smart of the NAACP of asking us this question is made us all go research it as board members so that before we sit at the table, we're orienting ourselves to exactly what Kay was saying, which is that community thinking. And really what we're trying to do is establish a path for dignity and discipline, but it's actually bigger than that because what we're doing is really changing the mindset of the grown-up. We need to give them a tool and language to be better at catching a child before there's actually any need to do any restoration at all. This is about changing the work of the grown-up. And I really like that we have a district now that's committed our 4 middle schools and our 2 high schools to this particular orientation. And I could go on for a really long time. So thank you both, Andrew and Kay and everyone else for your enthusiasm. And Travis, your wife, I met yesterday. I'm not surprised she has a book. So it's just great to be with this particular group of people that have this commitment to this particular issue. So thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we'll have question number 5. How do you plan to listen to and gather input from the community? G.R. Gordon Ross.
You know, as a board member, we kind of talked about it last night. You know, getting input from the community is kind of just comes with the territory, be it public comment at a board meeting, be it emails, be it the Dylan's conversations that we talked about last night. You know, the input comes and listening to it, evaluating it, responding to it is part of the job. And I'll just be real and say that I'm probably the single worst person on the planet and responding to it, but I do read it. I do take it into consideration, and so that's probably the main way to receive the input, to have those conversations. The social media pages that I have been active and stay active, and I use them as well to interact with the community. And so those probably all those various ways would be how I would do those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Clissold.
I want to listen to the community however they want to communicate. If they want to stop me in Dylan's, I'm completely approachable and will listen to you. I actually think as a school board member, it's my responsibility and very important to respond to the people who are communicating what their ideas are and what their interests are. If we're not letting them know that we hear them and that they are important and their feelings are valid, then what are we doing on the school board? I mean, this is about community. It's about our students. And, social media is a big part of communication. So, but it's not just about what people are saying, it's what they're not saying. So also paying attention to the actions that we see in our community and our schools. You have to be able to read between the lines and know when something isn't right. But I think it's very important that we take the time and let people know their voice is heard, because they deserve a voice at the table. And our community is important. If they take the time to send me an email or call me, I'm responding. I don't care how many it is.
Thank you. Next, we have Douglas Redding.
Traditional paths of communication: Twitter, Facebook, email, and any number of apps are ways to communicate with the community at large. But I don't think you can only do that. I think you have to seek it out a little bit at least, and yes, respond to anyone who wants to contact you. But it doesn't. And I'm more of a Checkers natural grocers kind of guy, but definitely talk to anyone who wants to talk to you, and seek it out from your coworkers, from anyone who's going to give you the straight shot. And that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you. Next, we have Kelly Jones.
So since I've been on the board, I've tried to make myself available to people as frequently as I can. In the last year, I've probably responded to thousands of emails. I've met with hundreds of teachers and parents. Some of you that are here I've met with, not in my home, but by Zoom, sort of in my home, as we all are here. I also try to run to those folks who are most frustrated with me to see like what's happening. I make a really big effort to reach out to teachers that are serving families that maybe are not likely to come up and talk to a board member, or not likely to show up at a board meeting, to make sure I understand what's happening in those spaces. This is an area where I've really tried to do the best that I can. And in some cases, the answer isn't always exactly what the family wants to hear, but it is in my thinking, and I use it as a point of data to inform the decisions that I make. So sometimes it appears that it hasn't made a difference, but it's actually informed my vote. And I appreciate every dialogue I've had in the last 3.5 years.
I will repeat the question. How do you plan to listen to and gather input from the community? Elizabeth Stevens.
Thank you, Ursula. I think about, when answering this question, I think about what has been the most impactful for me. And that's having someone take the time to come to me and engage and seek out my thoughts and my opinions and my views. For me, I feel like, the priority for me is to talk to people who live in the margins. I want to hear what they have to say. And if that means that I go to them and we do a small group forum, I'm happy to do it. I think that taking the initiative and going and seeking out people who otherwise may not feel empowered enough to give their input sends a really clear message that we do care, and that their input and their experience is incredibly valid.
Thank you. Next, we have Miranda Zerlengo.
So choosing to run for this position is coming from a place of a frustrated parent that did not feel heard. So, and I spoke with many other parents and students that felt the same way. And because of that, I feel not only that you need to be in the schools and try to engage at a level of where our students are, and being available to them, and to hear them, to really hear our students and our parents that may be frustrated or won't advocate or don't know that they should push or ask questions. And that's really important to me. So I think it's being available. I think it's responding. I think it's gathering the information and taking the next step to help ensure that things are moving forward. And having action behind your words is really important.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrew Nussbaum.
Thank you. a long time ago, 2009, I was working with some young women in displaced communities, and one of them said, "You're just another white person, dot, dot, dot." I was like, "That's true, I am. What can I do?" She said, "Believe me, tell my story and come back." So I believed her, told the story, and came back again and again. I can't do that in the district anymore as an employee. I'm making that decision, but I can believe, I can come back, and I can tell story potentially as a school board member with positionality, with an experience both institutionally where I can listen to stakeholders in the community, which are classified staff and certified staff are stakeholders and family members and parents, and institutionally where I have relationships and partnerships with grassroots organizations and people. In this district, I've worked with family systems that have not been included and are not included. Recently, we had data come out about police in schools. The reality is the students and the families that I work with have been policed, have been pushed out, and they didn't even know there was a data going around about that. And yet that data was presented to keep SROs in school. Not okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Travis Tozer.
I'm going to once again agree with Kay. That seems to be a pattern. Accessibility, I believe, is all the key. I understand that being on the board goes beyond 1 or 2 meetings per month. I'm fairly recognizable, maybe noticed my height. So I say to parents, seek me out, stop me on the street, stop me at the store. I will hear you out. I'll chat with you. I also have a Facebook page, Travis Tozer for USD 497 School Board. Write a post, I'll respond, happy to. My personal email has been circulated widely. It was on my form when I registered, when I declared my candidacy. Hit me up with an email. We will have some coffee. Also, I don't see any reason why not to catch some football games. Meet me there. Happy to talk to the public whenever they find me.
Thank you. Next, we have Kay Emerson.
And thank you, Travis. I will not call you Trevor tonight. I'm a huge believer that to listen and gather input, you not only have to create opportunity, but you have to take part in it. You know, it's one of the reasons, for example, at our Lawrence Public Libraries, we have these awesome Let's Talk race kits. It took me over 3 years to work with Karen and Jenny to develop, but now we have a resource that is able to impact the entire Douglas community, Eudora, you know, in addition to students who are not connected with our public schools. So I say this because we as a community must stay engaged together. We have to get involved. We have to show up. We have to be present, and it's really going to take us all. So for me, you know, I really have a commitment to continue to be involved, creating things like days of service where we get together, we're cleaning up our neighbor's yard, or having weekly conversations similar to what I'm doing right now called Voice in Space, which is a weekly conversation from 6:30 to 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. So we just have to stay involved, and it's going to take us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nate Morches.
I just so much agree with everything that's been said here today. Every single piece of this has to happen. You know, responding to communications, meeting families, students, and staff, seeking out those relationships. I just want to talk a little bit about how important the community is to me. My grandfather was a wonderful example of a community man. He would have parties every Sunday night where he would invite 100 people into a very small house in the lawns, and he would have food, drinks, singing, dancing. He would pull people off the street and welcome them in. And this is the model that I had. It's the type of relationship building that I love to do. It's why I started my business. It's why I'm running for school board, to benefit the community, to make these connections, and just very grateful having had that experience growing up.
Thank you. And I would like to thank all the candidates for agreeing to be on our panel this evening. It was a great discussion. And I would like to say to the community, make sure you get out there and vote. I hope you gather enough information to make an informed vote. And our voting laws are changing and not in a very good direction. This is a right that we have earned, and I really hope everybody gets out there and takes advantage of it. Thank you.